Good afternoon, I'm Stephen Ogden, the Principal of St Francis College, and it's my pleasure here to welcome you this day to this book launch. I've only recently found out that it's being recorded, so my 2-minute remarks are now 2 hours, and this will give me an opportunity to present a few things. But we're thrilled to see so many of you here today. It's terrific, and you're obviously hoeing into the food and wine, which is great. This particular day in the liturgical calendar, everyone is exempt from the Lenten discipline, so I want to encourage you to enjoy. But these are great occasions. I always enjoy a book launch, and particularly in recent years, St Francis College, we've hosted a number of them. And in particular, again, Greg has featured in several. Greg, as you know, is the academic dean of the college and does a superb job as that. Very fine and accomplished scholar. And I think it's fair to say in the last 2 or 3 years, in terms of his own career, and I'm including now the Bethsaida expedition as well as riding, he's really entered into a purple patch. And this book... Now let's be realistic. And it's just been great to watch Greg as a friend and colleague flourish in his career, and it brings us to this point today. So welcome once again. Thank you for your support of Greg's career and this event, and please, I insist, before you go, at least buy 3 or 4 copies of the book. It'll make a great present to friends you have, but please buy up. We're also delighted to have here the Reverend Canon Dr. Nigel Leaves to launch the book. Nigel has written a book or two himself and knows something about the church and writing and theology, and I couldn't think of a better person than to launch the book this day. So without further ado, welcome Nigel.
Well, if I asked you straight out what makes a good book, how would you respond? So being some sort of an academic, I decided I'd Google it and try and find out some literary critics who would tell me what exactly you would find in a good book. And according to the experts, there will be 4 universal elements that can apply to just about any book or genre. Just 4. So it doesn't matter whether the book's fiction or non-fiction, you should have these 4 things in the book. 1, an interesting voice guiding the story. 2, a vivid setting. Where is the action taking place? 3, memorable characters and plot. Do they make the story come alive? And 4, it must be a gripping story. Will I want to put the book down? So let's see if we can apply these 4 elements to Greg's book. First of all, the interesting voice. Now that's considered the most important element of all. If the reader doesn't connect with the voice in the book, then they'll close the book or put the book down. Well, as soon as you open Jesus Then and Jesus Now, you'll find a voice not only engaging you, but also leading you into and through the story. And of course, it's Greg's voice. It's one that encourages you to become part of his story. A story that's been with him all his life, is still with him, and I think he'll probably take the story to his grave. It's the Jesus story, and how it has affected and still affects him. As he says, Jesus has been the philosopher's stone in my pursuit of identity, meaning, and purpose. So there's an interlacing of Greg's then and now with Jesus's then and now. The Jesus that Greg grew up with and the Jesus that Greg has now. I guess with Jesus scholars and Jesus books, very often they're dismissed as being too objective, too distant, too dispassionate, as if they're dissecting a corpse and leaving it out to rot in the open sun. Well, Greg's book is a much more intimate affair, laying bare himself as he explores who Jesus might be for authentic humanity in the 21st century. And hence the subtitle of the book. And remember, subtitles are much more important than the titles of the books. So looking for Jesus, finding ourselves is the real bit of the story. And the inference is that we might find the real Greg Jenks in that story. So look very deep and find the real Greg Jenks. So yes, we have an interesting voice, and so we can tick the first one in the box. Secondly, a vivid setting. Well, what is better than the Holy Land, and in particular the villages of Galilee which Jesus frequented, and about which most modern-day Christians are quite ignorant. And that opens the first section of the book, and one where Greg, as co-director of the Bethsaida Archaeological Project, particularly excels. And those from St. Francis who have been or are going to and will spend endless hours with Greg under the baking Palestinian sun, sifting for tiny fragments of pottery or lost coins, then chapters 2 and 3 are for you. But they're also for everyone else, because Greg brings alive the New Testament setting and the environment that we hear about read in the Gospels day in, day out, or on a Sunday morning. And that leads to chapter 4, the social milieu in which Jesus preached and the social roles available to him, which Greg identifies as Jesus the prophet. Again, we've lost sight of all that because of 2,000 years of church history and our appropriation of Jesus in our own image. And again, the subtitle, Finding Jesus, Finding Ourselves. So yes, the book passes the second box. The tick is put in for the vivid setting. Thirdly, memorable characters and plot. Well, I guess for the Christian there can be no one more memorable than Jesus of Nazareth and the trials and tribulations of his life as told in the New Testament. And here we come to chapters 5 to 8. And Gregory visits all those well-known characters and the storylines about Jesus, his friends and his opponents, his talking of the kingdom of God, and so on. And he very skillfully reworks and critically examines all that through the eyes of the historian. And that's where Greg's years as New Testament scholar expertise comes to the fore. Here is the wealth of knowledge that came about through the Jesus Seminar, the Society of Biblical Literature, and the lectures delivered here at the college and elsewhere, both in Australia and internationally. And in case you're thinking, well, that's all the dry bits which I won't try and read, think again. For again, they're written in an accessible way that's very easy to follow. I won't spoil your reading by saying or telling you who Greg thinks Jesus really was or what he was up to, but let me say it just makes all perfect sense. So another tick in the box for the memorable characters and the plot. But what about a gripping story? Well, you know that the book will grab you and that you can't put it down if the book gathers pace towards the end of the book. And here we have the last chapters, 9 to 12. They bring us out of the New Testament world, the Jesus then, and into today, the Jesus now. And the basic question I think Greg is trying to answer is, how do we preach Jesus today? And that's especially significant as we live in a multi-faith world, a secular world, a scientific world, and a postmodern relativistic environment. And Greg tackles all those interesting issues. Again, no spoiler alerts. I want you to try and read the book yourself, but be assured that the book ends in a positive and a very triumphant way with a vision of a life-enhancing Christian community that embraces who Jesus was and is, both then and now. So yes, we'll give a 4th tick in the box. So on your behalf, as you gather here today, I'd like to congratulate Greg on a wonderful and stimulating book that I trust all of you will not only buy, but also read and debate. It would be an excellent parish or discussion group book, and Greg has written a study guide that can be used with it, so do look out for that as well. We were thinking, how could we launch the book? Normally, if it's a ship or whatever, you have this bottle of champagne which you smash against the hull. So we're thinking perhaps we could have a piece of rope which came down here and we could swing it, but unfortunately that wasn't going to work at St. Francis College. So, as with most things, I have my assistant Sharon with me this afternoon, and she will unveil the book for you with the red ribbon. So, with great pleasure, with great honour, I officially launch Jesus Then and Jesus Now. Looking for Jesus, finding ourselves.
I think it's only appropriate now that we have a response from the author.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. I knew I asked you for a reason, I just didn't know what the reason was, but thank you. It's become clear, that's for sure. Thank you. So, on that note, let me thank all of you for taking the trouble to come here. It means a great deal to me that you've turned out in such numbers and you represent so many different parts of my life and the people I've worked with, from my first Jesus teacher, my mother, as I put in the front of her copy of the book, to those that work with me here in this context, and the students who continually ask me confounding questions, particularly when the video recorder is running and they're waiting to prepare more ammunition for the synod debate, which unfortunately has been rescheduled till after I return from Bethsaida this year. So bring it on. Secondly, to Nigel, my colleague and friend, with whom I do share so many interests, and alongside of whom I so often find myself standing in different contexts. I'm glad that life, as Don Cupid would say, has conspired to bring us together, even if others around the Diocese of Brisbane are not so pleased at this particular convergence at St. Francis Theological College. So it's a delight for me that Nigel was able to launch the book. I know he's working on his own Jesus book. I know he wanted an advanced copy of mine to make sure I wasn't stealing too much of his thunder, and he seemed reassured that I was a biblical scholar and therefore not in the ballpark at all compared with his work as a person who writes from systematics. But perhaps the book will be mentioned in THL 215 from time to time. Thirdly, I want to acknowledge the role that this place has played in my own life, and especially in the preparation of this book. But if you scan some of the photos around the wall, you'll get a glimpse of the significance of this place for me, both as a student and as a scholar over the years. Much of my adult life has actually revolved around this place, and almost all of my Anglican life has revolved around this place. And in the last few years, as Stephen mentioned, it's also been a place which has provided the context for me to write and to, in a sense, find my voice. They say that when a humanities scholar turns 60, they're at their peak. So I guess I'm over the peak, but I'm pretending I'm still 60. Okay. So this particular book, of course, is largely the fruit of my study leave last year, and I deeply appreciate that opportunity to take leave of my work, but not my salary, which is what a study leave opportunity, of course, is all about. And finally, for this list of acknowledgements, I want to also thank Eve, who's standing down the back. At no small cost to herself, Eve has encouraged me to pursue my research and to put time into writing. And the care and the energy that's gone into the arrangements for the hospitality this afternoon are one expression of that consistent generosity which many of us know to be one of Eve's best attributes but not her only attribute. So thank you to Eve as well. So from Eve to Jesus. That's better than going from Adam to Eve, I guess. I do chair a committee here which has as one of its members a person called Adam Lowe and another member called Eve James. So I took great delight writing up the minutes last week with Adam and Eve are going to serve on this particular subcommittee. After 65,000 words, what more is there to say about Jesus? Well, of course, there's a great deal yet to be said, and this book is simply one more validation of the observation made at the end of the Gospel of St. John almost 2,000 years ago. The very last verse of John's Gospel reads, there are also many other things that Jesus did. If every one of them were written down, I suppose the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. Well, we're giving it our best shot to fill up the world with books about Jesus. They continue to be written, and the last word has, of course, not been spoken. And this new book is part of that immense process of reflection on the significance of this Jewish man from the Galilee. It's not the last word, but it's my contribution to the larger conversation. As I observe at one point in the book, and I was glad that Nigel didn't quote this passage, he quoted another passage, but as I say at one point in the book, Jesus has been central to my deepest sense of identity and worth. There's never been a time in my upbringing when Jesus was not the embodiment of the best aspirations of those people in my intimate circle. That doesn't mean I still believe now what I believed then, but Jesus has been the constant model of the best that I could be. Indeed, to be like Jesus and to see the character of the Christ formed and developed within me is my religion in a nutshell. Looking for Jesus, then, is far more than an academic research interest. It has been, and it still is, in a very real sense, a quest for my own better self. And so, from Jesus to the book. In some ways, this book has been a long time in the making. It had other titles and other drafts at different points in time. But in another way, the book was actually quite easy to write when the time came to write it. I'd lived with the core content for so long. The privilege of spending 5 months living in Tiberia, to my Palestinian friends, Tiberia, to my Jewish friends, by the Sea of Galilee, was the perfect setting for working on the book. And basically, I set myself the goal of knocking off a chapter a week, and more or less did that during the 13 weeks or so of my leave. I must also add my thanks to my Bethsaida colleague, Ramia Rav, whose family home in Tiberia was so kindly made available for me to rent as my home in Tiberias during my time last year. And also conscious of my many friends from Nazareth, that other town in the Galilee, who have encouraged me to see the hometown of Jesus as also my own hometown. So the book draws together, as Nigel has alluded to, my long-term interest in the historical Jesus, including work with the Jesus Seminar, my recent involvement with the excavations at Bethsaida. It reflects my own engagement with Scripture as words of life and liberation, and it expresses my passion to make faith relevant to everyday life here and now. So if I can quote myself, which is always good to do when you can get away with it, this is from about, I think, the second paragraph in the introduction. This collection of essays draws together some of my thoughts about Jesus of Nazareth. I hope it will offer glimpses of Jesus then and Jesus now that are both fresh and interesting. It is not my goal to persuade you to agree with my perspectives on Jesus, unless you're one of my students, no. But I do hope that you will find the book provokes you to think more deeply about what you know about Jesus, how you know that, and what difference it makes to the way you choose to live your own life. Writing this book has certainly helped me to do all three. In conclusion, a word on the dedication. The book is dedicated to Claire and Lizzie, neither of whom can be here today for different reasons. And that dedication came as a surprise to them as they opened their copies of the book for the first time a week or so ago. We'd kept that as a little surprise. In part, it was to fulfill a father's promise. The next book will be for you girls, because they were sick of other people being acknowledged in the dedication. But it's also because it's essential for the torch to be passed to the next generation if the dangerous memory of Jesus, a phrase that comes from Elizabeth Johnson, to be kept alive. And I hope this book will do just that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your support. Before you go, could you please consume all the wine and food? That would be much appreciated. But the final thing I want to say is that Greg's got a beautiful writing style, and I know enough about this book to know where it's pitched, and I really would suggest you go buy another copy because there will be people out there who are genuinely searching, and I suspect that Greg's style in this particular book could be of a great help in a number of people in their terms of their spiritual journey. So buy up. Thanks for coming.